What's going on, guys? Marco here with Front Yard Fantasy, and I am bringing you my running backs 1 to 10 today. So before we jump in, I want to make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have tons of content coming out each and every day, and as the season kicks off in the next couple of weeks, you are not going to want to miss a single bit of it. We've got tons of analysts that are going to be bringing you everything you need to win your titles. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Marco_14P. Now, let's jump into it. Number one, we're not going to talk about him long, but it is Christian McCaffrey. I know some people are already up in arms because they wanted Jonathan Taylor. Don't worry, he's next. But Christian McCaffrey, here's the reason why he's number one for me. Over his career, he has averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game, and that includes the last 2 seasons where he played more than 60% of the snaps only 5 times over the last 2 seasons. And obviously, he missed time. He played injured, on and off. That's just part of the deal, but that's why he was at 22.5 fantasy points per game and not 26 or 27 fantasy points per game, because in his healthy seasons, that's where he was. That 22.5 fantasy points per game is actually 3 fantasy points per game more than Jonathan Taylor. And he's done it over 3 seasons longer than Jonathan Taylor. And you might be thinking 3 fantasy points per game, that's not that much. That's actually the difference between winning and losing a lot of the times. And if you extrapolate that over a whole season, it's the difference of, RB1 to RB4, and that might not be a huge deal, but it matters week in and week out, and fantasy is a weekly game. He is the most elite fantasy producer in the NFL when he is healthy. Obviously, that is a huge caveat, but none of his injuries were really injuries that I think made compounding injuries a thing for him. Some of them were like, okay, this kind of probably caused this, but year over year, it's not something that I'm overly concerned about. He looks healthy. He looks speedy, shifty, fast, strong. He does all of those things well. CMC should be your number 1 pick. I know he's a little bit riskier, but when you look at the running backs, all of the running backs are injury risk. They all have the injury risk, and it's absolutely impossible. It's a fool's errand to try to predict running back injuries. He's had them in the past. I don't know if they're that much of a concern that I'm saying I don't want to touch this guy, because he is that good. All right, number 2 on the list is the guy that everyone is probably looking for at number 1. It's Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, over his career, has averaged 19.5 fantasy points per game. He is a lot of people's RB1, 101 in drafts, and Taylor is really a near lock to surpass 350 touches like he did last year. This offense should be improved with Michael Pittman taking a step, Matt Ryan now leading this team. The more scoring opportunities could be on the table for Jonathan Taylor. Some of the concerns, though, are that he's not a spring chicken. He didn't come into the NFL with a light workload. He ran a ton in college. He's been run a ton in the NFL. He is not completely risk-free. His usage and the way he plays are violent. So he has a lot of risk as well, but he's still one of the elite producers when he's healthy, and that's why he is my number 2. I don't really care if you take him number 1, but for me, he's my running back 2. All right, number 3 is when it immediately gets interesting. For me, I have DeAndre Swift as my running back 3. Swift was on pace for 102 targets and over 509 receiving yards last year, and that was while playing beat up, sharing work with Jamal Williams. He had TJ Hawkinson on the field. Amon-Ra St. Brown came on late in the season. He was on pace for just over 198 attempts on the season if you were to play a full season. Obviously, the if is another one. That's a big if, but that's what we're going to be talking about with a lot of these running backs. A lot of injury risk just comes with the running back position, so I'm taking the guys who are putting up the point per game numbers that can win you leagues week in and week out. He also was near the top of the league with 0.98 fantasy points per touch. And he did that while only seeing 70% or more of the snaps in 6 of his 13 games. Top of round 2 ADP right now, which is an absolute steal. I'm willing to take him as early as pick 105. And if that's too rich for you, 108 to 112 is a perfect spot. And I think that's where he'll be going in the next week. I think we're going to see ADP adjust to that. But if you can get him, or if you already got him at the beginning of the 2nd round of your drafts, that is a steal. You're going to be happy. You've got an RB1 with upside to be a top 3 running back. The next guy on my list, you're going to see a common theme here, is another guy who's dealt with injury, but it looks like he is healthy. He is now 2 years removed from an ACL tear. It's Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. He is, similar to Christian McCaffrey, one of those prototype fantasy running backs. Again, he's dealt with injury, but it looks like he is back to full strength. Let's not parse words here. Saquon Barkley is the most complete running back in the NFL when he is on the field. There's really no conversation about it. As a pure rusher, he's probably top 3 to 5 in the league. As a pass catcher, he's probably top 3 to 5 in the league. He can do it all when he's given the opportunity, when he is healthy. His career average is just over 18 fantasy points per game, which would be 306 fantasy points if he played an entire season. And that would have put him just ahead of Najee Harris as the RB3 last season. We've been hoodwinked into thinking Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, this is what the RB1 looks like. This is the prototypical RB1. When in reality, Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley are really the prototypical RB1, especially if you play in PPR leagues because they catch tons of passes. They can do it on the ground. If these guys are healthy for even 13, 14 games this year of the 17, you will see a huge return on your investment. Let's keep moving here, and we're going to go to my running back 5 on the list. He's gotten a lot of hate lately, but he's one of those guys who has a perfect combination of volume and talent, even if his situation isn't amazing. It's Najee Harris. Najee, to me, is the less athletic version of Saquon Barkley. He's got strength. He's got incredible vision, patience, and footwork. His route running and pass catching ability is really near the top of the league. He doesn't get enough credit for his route running and what he can do as a pass catcher outside of just the volume of targets he saw. He lacks that true explosiveness, to be an elite fantasy option. When he's healthy and when everyone else is healthy, but he's still in that top 5 conversation because of his football IQ and the volume that he is likely to see in this offense. I don't really care if he was super inefficient last year because, again, it's volume. I don't care if it's Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett at quarterback. He's still probably going to see 75 plus targets. He's still likely to carry the ball 285 plus times this season. Right now, if Najee Harris sees exactly where I put him at, 285 carries and 75 targets, he is almost a lock to give you top 8, top 5 running back numbers. He's my running back 5 because I think he's going to be slightly more efficient, even with a bad offensive line. There's more weapons on this team, but there's not more weapons that necessarily demand targets, and Najee Harris will be a safety blanket, and he will be the go-to option for this offense. Mike Tomlin is one of the few coaches in the NFL who still uses a workhorse, and I mean a true workhorse running back, and they don't really have a ton of talent behind him. So it's Najee Harris or bust for the Steelers. All right, now time for my running back 6, and that is a guy who some of you guys might have a little bit higher, and I totally understand that, but it's Joe Mixon. He's coming in as my RB6 because here's the reality of the situation. Talent-wise, he's incredible. He's special. I think he could be a top 5 talent in the NFL when he's fully healthy and if he was utilized correctly. But the reality is, if we put into context his performance and usage over the last, 3-4 years of his career, his RB4 performance last year was one of the lowest production totals to reach the running back 4 on a season over the last 5+ years. The only one to do it with lower production totals was David Montgomery the year prior. We, like I said, similar to, Saquon JT, CMC JT, we've seen just lower totals when it comes to the running back position. So it's made running back 4 seem special, but really in the seasons that we've seen in the past where we've seen RB1s, RB2s put up 385 to 400 fantasy points, he's more like the RB6 to 10 range. And so I think he's going to see enough volume and he's going to be more efficient with this improved offensive line to get to that RB6 this year. That's why I've got him there. Unless he's seeing over 60 targets on a season, it's going to be hard for him to get into that top 5 this year if, this the running backs of the league, the top running backs of the league see, like I said, that 13 to 14 threshold of games played. He's only caught more than 40 passes 2 times in his entire career. Like I said, his running efficiency should rise, but he really needs to hit that 60 target threshold for me to move him into the top 5. Like I said as well, last season, he did it as RB4, but it was low production, even historically, for the RB4 position. He could get to that top 5 conversation if he sees that as targets. If he doesn't, it's going to be hard to do. And it's honestly going to be hard to get to those targets when he's got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd to compete with targets. All right, let's go to another guy on my list who's probably lower than most of you would expect, but it's Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler was incredible last year. But let's dive into some of the context, some of the situational production here for Austin Eckler last season. He saw 75. That's not a mistake. 75 more rushing opportunities than his highest career rushing opportunities ever. He scored 9 more rushing touchdowns than his career best. and he saw 88 more rushing opportunities than his average career rushing opportunities in one season. He also saw his second highest target total, and he tied his highest receiving touchdown total ever in his entire career. This just lines up for someone who is due for an insane regression. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a regression in efficiency, but his red zone opportunities will probably come down. He's going to share more of the backfield with Isaiah Spiller. Sure, if you believe in Kelly, Kelly will be involved. If you believe in Roundtree, maybe. They added a guard to this offense. They've added pieces of this defense. They want to run the ball a little bit more, and I think they know that the most efficient use of Austin Ekeler, which we've seen him, year in and year out prove to us, is using him more as a pass catcher, getting him to that 95 to 110 target range. And if you can do that as Austin Ekeler, that's a win. Right now, I've got him projected for 96 targets on the season and 160 rush attempts, which is around 45 rush attempts less than last year, but it's still around 45 more than his career average. Ultimately, I don't think Austin Ekeler is going to be a huge drop-off in production from last year. I've got him 29 fantasy points behind the RB3 on the season. It just works out where his usage is going to be best for the long term if they scale down his rushing, and that's going to land him in that RB6 to 10 range. I've got him as my RB7 on the season, and I think right now as the 104 in ADP in redraft leagues, that's a little bit too rich for me. So if he were to come down a few spots, I think 108's the earliest I'm comfortable taking a guy like Austin Ekeler. He's heading into his age 27 season. That tends to be a little bit of a cliff for running backs. Incredible talent. I'm just worried about currently where his cost is and what that's going to mean for your fantasy teams. Number 8 on my list is Alvin Kamara. We don't have a ton to talk about. Assuming he does not get suspended this year, assuming the suspension, if he does get one, comes next year, he's almost a lock to see around 185 rushing opportunities, surpass 100 targets on the season. He is an insanely efficient player who scores double-digit touchdowns all but 2 years of his career. He is just everything you want in a running back, and if he is on the field, he's probably going to see just that same exact usage because he is one of the most consistent volume running backs when you look at what he gets as a rusher, what he gets as a receiver, year in and year out. And if he's healthy, if he's not suspended, you can expect him to be a top 10 running back in 2022. Number 9 on my list is the guy that everybody loves, the outlier among all outliers. It's Derrick Henry. He's another guy that I'm a little bit lower than consensus on. And I will say, his overall total projection for me is only, I think, 31.6 fantasy points away from being a top 3 running back. But here's the reality. He's heading into his year 28 season. Like I said, he's been an outlier for the last, 3 years. Everyone's saying he's going to break down this year. He's going to break down this year. Unfortunately, I do think this is the year where we start to see a reduction in usage or just a change in scheme and offense because this team lost A.J. Brown. It's not just a plug Traylon Burks in and everything's, status quo. That's what people want to believe. That's just not the case. Traylon Burks, whether you believe in his struggles or not, ultimately, I don't think I'm really concerned about them. Traylon Burks is going to have some growing pains in the NFL. Robert Woods is probably going to be the wide receiver 1 for this team for a little while. Tannehill is getting up there in age as well. So that just makes me really nervous about the thought of Derrick Henry having to carry this entire offense another year. If he's able to stay healthy for that 13 to 14 games, he's a lock to be an RB1, an absolute lock to be an RB1. But the risk factors heading into this season, again, his age 28 season, he is one of those guys that when it falls off because of his usage, because of his play style, he's not really involved in the passing game. He is going to hit that cliff fast. Again, I don't think he hits the full cliff, but he slows down or the offense just has to adjust to its scheme to make sure that he can last the whole season. He's my RB9. It's not an indictment on the player. It's just what the other running backs in this league can do if they're healthy, and pass catching is a big part of that. They don't need to see 350 carries to get into that top 5, top 3 conversation at the running back position, where Derrick Henry does need to do that. All right, number 10 is a little spicy, but it's a guy I really believe in. Breece Hall. Obviously, he is the Jets for the New York. He's the Jets for the New York running backs. No, he's the running back for the New York Jets. He hasn't stepped onto the football field in a regular season game yet, but that shouldn't scare you away from him. The worst excuse you can have in fantasy football is that, oh, he's a rookie. He hasn't done it yet. If you follow that logic, you've missed Saquon Barkley's best season. You've missed Najee Harris be the RB3. You've missed Kareem Hunt absolutely explode onto the scene. You have missed a ton of running backs who are considered elite. You've missed their best season a lot of the times if you missed out on their rookie season. Sure, Michael Carter will be involved. Likely, though, he's going to be the lesser half of a 60-40 split, and come the end of the season, he could be the lesser half of a 70-30 split, because Breece Hall truly is an every phase player. He can do it on the ground. He can do it in the red zone. He can do it between the 20s. He can do it through the air. He is one of the best combinations of smooth and athleticism that you've seen at the running back position. He is a very high football IQ guy who has the speed and the strength that it looks just easy when he is on a football field. Sure, his preseason game wasn't phenomenal. I'm not over worried about that. He was with like the 2s and the 3s of the offensive lines. Hall is the top of this tier for me. This is a tier break at 9 at Derrick Henry. Hall starts the next tier, and the tier runs from running back 10 to running back 14. And there's running backs like, obviously, Dalvin Cook wasn't mentioned. He's in that tier. Javonte Williams. He could fall anywhere in that range, and those guys could jump up to RB10 for sure. But right now, what I see for Breece Hall is a guy who's likely to dominate scoring opportunity and see at least the majority of the split when it comes to passing down work. I've got him projected for 289 total touches and 10 touchdowns on the season. Breece Hall is my running back 10. Let me know your thoughts below. Hit me up on Twitter. I'll answer any questions, as many questions as I can on YouTube. But if you really want me to get back to you fast, hit me up on Twitter at Marco_14P. Thanks for hanging out. It's been good. Be kind. Do good. Peace.